Hey guys, welcome on into the next NHL season preview show. And today we're going to be talking all about the Florida Panthers, looking at their additions and subtractions, coming free agents, possible lineup, team future bets, and player future bets. And to do that with me today, I brought Nick Earle. Before we get to introductions, though, I'm going to do something a little bit different for this NHL season preview show than I'm going to do for any other show, and that is thank the Florida Panthers,
Yeah.
because Nick and I both cashed on the Florida Panthers to win the Stanley Cup. So I'm sorry about the writing. This was a last minute idea, but I wanted to thank the Florida Panthers for winning the Stanley Cup. Now,
They
back
were
to
so
going
much fun
towards
last year.
this year's preview show. Nick, obviously the Panthers were good to you last year. Um, and you've introduced yourself before, but give people a quick introduction for people that haven't seen you before.
Yeah. From Earl Sports Bets. So we do our show every morning. The Florida Panthers were a lot of fun. I think me and you bet that about a day and a half apart because I was looking on betting it for a while, and then I saw you bet it, and then it dropped down to like 8-1 or whatever, and then when it went right back up to 10-1, I grabbed it. So the Florida Panthers were a lot of fun last year.
Awesome. We're going to get right into it here. And Florida Panthers are a team that did quite a bit this offseason. They made quite a bit of moves this offseason. I'll start as I always do with the subtractions here. And right off the bat, looking at things, um, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Brandon Montour. Those are two big losses to the defense for this Florida Panthers team. Nick Cousins as well. Vladimir Tarasenko, an offensive guy, leaving. Anthony Stolarz, one of the best backups in the NHL, also gone. Ryan Lomberg, a really good physical bottom six guy, gone. So Kyle Okposo obviously didn't play the full season there, so it is what it is there. But a lot of these guys had big parts on this Florida Panthers team last year, or at least played quite a bit of games with this Florida Panthers team, and they're all gone. Looking at the additions, I guess for Boquist, Thomas Nosek, a couple bottom six forwards. Boquist has always had that potential, hasn't quite got there yet. Chris Driedger coming in to be the third goaltender here, with Spencer Knight should be the backup this year to Sergei Bobrovsky. Nate Schmidt, Adam Boquist being added to kind of help soften the blow on Ekman-Larsson and Montour. But in my opinion, looking at the Panthers offseason, and when you win the Stanley Cup, this is going to happen. You're going to lose guys, and that's what the Panthers have done. And overall, I look at this offseason, and I do think that they've got worse here in the offseason. I don't think it's going to be a drastic drop off. I'm not saying that they're going to fall off a cliff or anything, but when you look at the moves here in the offseason, Ekman-Larsson, Montour, Stolarz, Tarasenko, those are big losses. So I think the Panthers had a bit of a down offseason, but that's to be expected when you win the Cup. Nick, additions, subtractions, what are your thoughts here on the Panthers offseason?
Yeah, Florida Panthers. Welcome to what the NHL calls the Cup tax. You won the Cup last year. You made the Cup the year before. Guess what? Your players are going to want more money, and that's just the way it is. And you can't afford a lot of players then. And it happened here. I mean, Lorenz was a awesome depth piece. They lost. Brandon Montour was one of their top defensemen. I believe he quarterbacked the power play as well. Like that's it. That's probably the biggest loss for them out of anybody was Brandon Montour because he's your power play quarterback. He's your top defenseman, and he's now gone. I believe he's in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. That was a great move for the Kraken. I like that for them. Tarasenko is a nice veteran to have that you don't have anymore. Kevin Stenlund, same thing. He was a nice little depth piece. Ryan Lomberg, a nice little depth piece. And that's the thing is when it comes to the Cup tax, you're not really going to lose your top players as often. You're going to lose those depth pieces that help you win the Cup. Like for when it was the Tampa Bay Lightning, they lost that third line with Killorn and with Goudreau And for the Panthers is you're losing Cousins and you're losing Stenlin and Lomberg and Lorentz. You're losing those depth guys, and they're just not going to have the depth that they had last year. On the flip side, Chris Driedger coming in to be the third string. That's if are we going to see Knight at all? Like, we didn't see him like at all last year. I know he had personal issues. It wasn't injuries. I think it was like he checked himself into player assistance or something like that. I don't know what to expect from him, honestly. So I can see Driedger being the backup. And yeah, they try to replace Montour with Schmidt and Boquist. We'll see how it works. That's just the way that happens when you win the cup. You have to pay the cup tax, and they lost some players here.
Yeah, for sure. And Spencer Knight, though, I don't know exactly. We'll have to see. Obviously, preseason will tell a lot on what's going to happen with the Panthers goaltending. Looking at upcoming free agents, who is a free agent this upcoming season? And Nick, I'll let you go first with this one. Really, yeah, I'll let you go first with this one. What are your thoughts here, upcoming free agents?
Yeah, by the way, the one thing I wanted to tag on for the last page as well is they also extended why can't I remember his name now? Bennett. They extended Bennett, right? Or no?
Sam Reinhart.
Reinhart.
Sam Reinhart.
It was the other power play guy, Reinhart. They extended Reinhart. That's not on this list. That's a big extension. Honestly, if I was the Panthers, I would have said thank you for an awesome season. Lose my number because you're going to want too much money. But they re-signed him, so that was one thing I also wanted to mention for the additions is re-signing a player like that. Obviously, I think this list starts and ends with Verhaeghe. He's been absolutely phenomenal at Florida, so we'll see what happens with that. Bennett's probably going to want a decent pay raise as well. Let's see if they can afford him there. We'll see what Schmidt looks like on the blue line. I think Ekblad's an important one there because he's one of your top defensemen, and you don't want to lose Montour and Ekblad back-to-back years. That would be kind of rough. So I can see that being one of the bigger pieces they want to re-sign as well. Not a big list, though, all things considered. But when you saw the last page we had with all those losses and all those signings, you kind of expected there to be not as many to be re-signed next year.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, I completely agree with Nick. As you can see, the three players' pictures that I have here with Bennett, Verhaeghe, and Ekblad. Sam Bennett is actually really important in that second line. He does really well with Tkachuk on that line. Verhaeghe sometimes plays with them, sometimes plays on the top line. But yeah, those two guys, you really want to try to find a way to get them re-signed. Ekblad has played with Florida his entire career. He's one of those guys. It'd be kind of weird seeing him anywhere else. But Nate Schmidt, it's all depends on how his year goes this year. I think will determine his future. And then those RFAs should be easy enough to re-sign, depending how their season goes here. But yeah, some teams, if you've got a big segment with the additions and subtractions, the upcoming free agents can be a lot smaller. Possible lineup. It has Spencer Knight on the depth chart here as the backup, so we'll see what happens with him and the goaltenders. But really, when you look at it, Bobrovsky is the starting goaltender. There's no goalie controversy here. I think he would have to really, really struggle for his job to be on the line. Of course, in the Stanley Cup last year, his job is probably pretty safe. So, not really much controversy with the goalies, but of course, who the backup is important. The defense: Forsling and Ekblad, Kulikov and Mikola, Schmidt coming in here with Adam Boquist. I like the top four. Dmitry Kulikov is more of a third pairing guy. So I do think that, and as we saw in the first segment, that the Panthers defense is taking a hit here. It'll just be up to those bottom three guys to help soften the blow here. When you look at the forwards, that top six is pretty much the same. It's going to be a great top six. And when you've got Eetu Luostarinen and Anton Lundell in your third line, you know you're doing something right. Those guys are really good players and could potentially be on second lines on a lot of other teams. And then the fourth line there, See how chemistry goes there. Of course, the Panthers had a lot of bottom six changes here, so it'll be kind of chemistry, seeing how all these guys mesh together. But luckily, the top six is the same. Bobrovsky is still there. The defense looks a bit different, though. So this Panthers team uh, might not be that hot out of the gate, I think, depending on how their schedule looks. Nick, what do you think about this possible lineup for the Panthers this season?
Yeah, it's funny how we looked at that first page. We saw so many of the players leaving and all that, and then you look at the projected lineup, and it kind of looks similar to last year. With the top six being the way that it is, with Lindell, with Listerinen. AJ Greer is I believe, a new face for them. Obviously, basically, I think the whole fourth line looks like a bunch of new faces for them. It was their blue line that obviously took the hit. Obviously, you saw we saw their top guys. Montour is gone and things along those lines, to a point where definitely the blue line is going to be a problem for the Florida Panthers, to potentially where this can be an over team based on their blue line just not being good. I mean, just in the Atlantic Division alone, I think there's probably plenty of blue lines that are better than Florida's, and it includes even teams like Buffalo's. I think is better than Florida's when it comes to blue lines. This is a massive step down to what they had last year, but that happens when you win the cup. I bet if you ask Florida fans that they got the Stanley Cup, they don't care about blue line being a little bit worse this year and things along those lines. So, but overall, the forwards, it doesn't feel like have changed much other than the fourth line, which it is what it is. The blue line definitely took a hit, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dreiger is your backup goaltender.
All right. Moving on to team future bets. And Florida's really interesting here because obviously they won the Stanley Cup last year. Here they are plus 1,000 to repeat. It is very, very difficult to repeat in the NHL and win back-to-back cups, uh, especially when you had the offseason that the Florida Panthers did. Um, no interest for me here on any of the top four bets. And it's not that I necessarily don't think Florida could be in the running for these. It's that the way I look at the Atlantic is I think it's a bit wide open. I think the Leafs, to be honest, I think the Leafs are the favorite with based on what they did their offseason and with the new head coach they have. I really like the Leafs. So I don't like the Panthers here for the top four bets. I like the Panthers to make the playoffs. So I'm not going to say take the no at plus 370. I don't think that happens. Point total here is a bit interesting. The Panthers total here is 102 and a half here, and they had 110 last year in the Atlantic Division. I don't know how big of a step back this Panthers team takes. Obviously, their defense has taken a hit, but Bobrovsky has been a very strong goaltender for the last few years with Florida. And I could see him standing on his head at times and kind of bailing out the Panthers defense. So really, when I look at this list, there's nothing I would really look at for the Panthers. Now, I didn't have my Stanley Cup ticket on them in the preseason last year. I did it in the middle of the season. So if the Panthers are showing me what they did last year, then it's very possible I end up pulling the trigger on a cup ticket for the Panthers. But for me, if they do get off to a slow start, you may want to wait to pull the trigger on the cup ticket because you can get a lot better prices if the Panthers do get off to a bit of a slow start here. Nick, team future bets. Do you like the Panthers to repeat again? What do you think of their win total? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, the win total was the interesting part for this because you mentioned how they got 110 points and then now it's down to a 102.5. The one thing you do have to consider though is last year's point total was 99.5. So they did go up. So they did go up from last year compared to what they were projected to do. So they expect them to be 3 points better than what they projected them to be last year. So I think that this team could go ahead and win the division again. Like they have the second highest, they're tied for the highest point total with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm not as high on the Maple Leafs as you are from what I've heard, the way I hear you talk about them a little bit. I think they got a little bit softer. I think they got a little bit slower in the offseason. I'm not a fan of what the Maple Leafs did. But when we're looking at this spot here, I would probably look to take another shot with them to win the division again. And joking around a little bit with the conference, I think you just split it between them and the Tampa Bay Lightning because the state of Florida has represented the East 5 straight years. There's 3 years in a row with Tampa, there's 2 years in a row with Florida, so why not go back to that there? President's Trophy, no. I do think they can get out to a slow start, which can make these numbers a little bit better. But with that being said, I mean, this would probably be a team where I would look for more positive than negative with them. I'd probably look over their point total, but I think you can get a better number midseason maybe. And same thing with the division, same thing with the conference, same thing with the Stanley Cup. I'll probably look to add these if they have very similar stat lines that they did last year. Because the reason why I pulled the trigger on them last year with their cup futures and things along those lines was that their advanced stats were awesome. Their expected goals numbers were some of the best in hockey. And if they do the exact same thing this season, then at the start of this season, I'll pull the trigger on them again. This is a wait and see type of team for me, but I'm only looking positive rather than negative with them.
Interesting. Very interesting. And we'll move on to the final segment for the Panthers here, which is taking a look at player future bets here. Alexander Barkov, he had 23 goals back-to-back years now. 80 points last year, 78 the season before that, 88 the season before that. And last year was the first season that he's played more than 70 games since 2018-2019. He played 73 games last year. For Barkov, he's only had one season where he played all 82 games in 2018-2019. So he's had some health issues. And when you're looking at a player props, it's tough to look at a player that has had issues here. I think this number is pretty right at 24.5, 83.5. So no plays for me there. Carter Verhaeghe, 34.5 goals. He had 34 last year, 42 the season before that. 72 points last year, 73 the season before that. So if I was going to look at anything, I would go with the point total over 70.5 for Verhaeghe. Depending on what line he's on, I can see the goals being spread out a bit. So I would much more be interested in the point total for him. Matthew Tkachuk, he had 26 goals last year, but 40 the season before that, and 42 the season before that. So quite a big drop off when you look at the goals last year. And same for points, really. He had 88 last season, while he had 109 in 22-23 and 104 in 21-22. So it was a bit of a drop off of a year for Tkachuk. But the books are looking at him to rebound pretty big here when it comes to goals and points. Ryan Hart, of course, had the best season of his career last year, 57 goals. The 2 seasons prior, he had 31 and 33. Last year, he had 94 points, 67 the season before that. And the season before that, his first season with Florida, he had 82 points. So he did have a pretty good season there, 21-22. But the goals last year, 57, was a lot. Of course, his numbers come down here a bit. It's going to be extremely hard for him to replicate exactly what he did last year again. But 57 last year, the books have him at 39.5. It's an interesting number, but I do think he's going to take a step back this year. And that's not saying anything. I'm not saying he's going to have a bad season, but he had an amazing career year last year. So I think he does come back a little bit down to earth here this next year. Bobrovsky, 36 wins last season, 24 the season before that, 39 the season before that. So I could see Bobrovsky getting his wins. No bet there for me. Basically, when it comes to this list, if I do get to anything, it'll probably be Carter Verhaeghe over 70.5 points. Nick, player future bets. Does anything catch your eye here on this list?
Yeah, I'm not really much of a player future bets type of guy, but if I'm looking at anything, give me the under on Reinhart goals. You score 57 last year, a ton of them are on the power play, and then you drop it to 39.5. That's telling me he's not just going to take a step back, but a pretty significant step back. And I kind of agree with that there. And one thing you also got to keep in mind is last year he was in a contract year. So of course you're going to step up, you're going to be more focused, you're going to be looking to play your absolute best in a contract year. He got his money now, so I see regression for Reinhart. Now he's going to be on the power play. He's going to have the opportunity to score goals on the power play. That's just what's going to happen. I would only look towards his under though, and I'm usually, if I'm betting player futures, their unders or nothing, because this is hockey. It's a physical sport. Injuries happen, and I know the books love taking overs on a bunch of different props because injuries happen and players miss time. So that's kind of the way I would look at it. There is probably unders with Reinhart. But Bobrovsky over wins is kind of interesting to me because of what we have in the backup role for the Florida Panthers. Like, do we see much of Spencer Knight or Chris Dreigler? Like, that's the ultimate question of how many games are they going to play, because how much do you trust them is the ultimate question. So maybe over wins if you think Bobrovsky gets 55, 60 starts. Now that's still asking a lot of Bobrovsky, but I think if you give him 55 starts, he wins 35 games. So I would probably look towards his over wins. Barkov, Selke, I mean, he's probably the favorite for it, I'm assuming. He's the best two-way center in hockey. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. During the Stanley Cup run last year, we learned exactly who Alexander Barkov was as a defensive centerman when he shut down, what was it? It was he shut down in the first series Matthews, and then Pastrnak. No, he didn't. No, it wasn't Matthews. Who's the first round series for them against?
Tampa Bay, I believe.
Oh, it was Kucherov, Pastrnak, and then Panarin. He shut them down for nothing, and then he limited McDavid a little bit, other than like the games that the Oilers were coming back in that series. So we saw exactly what Barkov was last year, and he's the best two-way forward in hockey. So probably the Selke's probably not a bad bet, but plus 130, I want a little bit better of return of investment on a future like that. So the only thing I'd really look at, Reinhart unders for me would be the way I would look.
All right. Yeah, you know me. I'm not going to look at unders for. I can't, especially for Sam Reinhart, who made me so much money last year on his anytime goal. I can't go and bet his unders and root for him to have a bad year. I just can't do that myself. But hey, if there's any Blackhawk players you like, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Bedard under points. He might get hurt. Why?
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That is the Florida Panthers season preview show. Nick, anything else you want to say before we finish the show?
I mean, when it comes to futures and stuff like that, you don't have to bet them before game one. That's the beauty of this. You can grab these mid-season. You can we grabbed our Stanley Cup futures halfway through the year. So when it comes to future bets, don't feel like you have to force them in before game one. And we learned with this team last year, you don't have to do that. So that's about all. Make sure you just see what these teams look like first. But yeah, I do think the Panthers are going to be a decent team again this year. Maybe they go back again. Who knows?
All right. Thank you for watching, and we will see you guys on the next show. Thanks, guys.